Welcome to this session on saturation church planting, and in this particular session we will be dealing with how the first century church functioned. We find this written down in 1 Corinthians 14:26. It says here, "How is it then, brethren, whenever you come together, each of you has a psalm, has a teaching, has a tongue, has a revelation, has an interpretation. Let all things be done for edification." And then later on in verse 29 it says, "Let 2 or 3 prophets speak, and let the others judge. But if anything is revealed to any other who sits by, let the first keep silent. For you can all prophesy one by one, that all may learn and all may be encouraged. And the spirits of the prophets are subject to the prophets, because God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints." So we see here that in the early church, when they gathered together, that everyone, I understand that in the original Greek New Testament, the word everyone comes 3 times. So everyone participates in this. Somebody has a psalm, somebody has a revelation, somebody has a teaching, somebody has a prophecy, somebody has a dream, somebody has a vision, somebody has a tongue, but you could not speak in tongue unless you had an interpreter in this church. So this is very interesting. And there were prophets, and 2 or 3 could prophesy, but if somebody was prophesying and somebody else had a revelation, then others had to keep quiet so this person could prophesy. But everything you said had to be checked by others to see whether you are saying the right thing or wrong thing. So this is a very, very participatory church, and very different from the church that we have today. We have an order of service, and there are 5 items which was mandated, I understand, from Bishop Gregory in the 5th century, that you have to have praise and worship, followed by 2 lessons from the Bible, and followed by a sermon, followed by announcements and offerings, and finally you depart or dismissed, as the Catholics say, dismissal with the blessing. So these 5 items, regardless of which church you belong to, whether it's charismatic, non-charismatic, dead church, alive church, we have never been able to get out of this 5 items. But this is not how the original church functioned. The original church functioned very differently. The first principle was, as mentioned in Hebrew 10:25, that they gather together. You must gather together and to encourage each other. So the function of the church was to encourage each other, and the purpose of prophesying what God is speaking to you was to edify the church, and so edification or growth of the church was very important. Exhorting each other, the word each other, praying for each other, and etc. comes 44 times in the New Testament, and so it was a very each other church, helping each other, supporting each other, encouraging each other, praying for each other. It was a very, very important part of the participatory church. But this is how the first century church functioned, until, as I said, Bishop Gregory came and mandated that you had to have these 5 items. Bishop Gregory was a very disciplined man, and he liked discipline in the church. He didn't want to speak anything. So this is how the priesthood finally took over and hijacked the whole thing, which was not the practice in the original church. Where did it all start? We know that in the 6th chapter of Book of Acts, 7 Greek people are appointed by Peter and John and the elders in the church to take the gospel from Jerusalem into the lands where Greek was spoken, and Paul was one of those people who later on took up the leadership in this. And out of those 7 people who had been laid hands on by the apostles in Jerusalem. One was Nicholas, and Nicholas, the word, this word Nicholas, this name Nicholas comes in Revelation, those 7 churches of Revelation, and the church of Ephesus and Pergamos, this thing in chapter 2 verse 6 and verse 15, we see that the Nicolaitans are there, and it says that Jesus hates these Nicolaitans. One of the interpretations of this Nicolaitan is that this Nicholas, who came here, he divided the church into speaking brothers and listening brothers, and this division took place because presumably he was well versed in the scriptures, and he was an intelligent man, and so he divided this church into speaking brothers and listening brothers, what we have today, the pastor, the clergy, and the layman. And so this is where it got started. From the first century itself we had a problem, but nowhere else Jesus hates anything. It's the only thing he hates is division between the priesthood and the layman. The reason is we are all royal priests, and we are all supposed to function as royal priests. Anybody who comes and begins to say, I am the leader, I am the only one who's going to speak, everybody has to listen, then Jesus hates that system. So here is Nicholas. Nicholas, the word Nicholas means Nikao means a conqueror, and Laos means ordinary people. Is somebody who conquers the ordinary people, and this is what happens. Layman means ordinary people, and somebody who comes and leads the church, and then he hijacks the whole thing and conquers the people and makes them ineffective. So this is not acceptable to Jesus. So this is an important distinction. It's a participatory church. Anything anybody says is subject to verification from the scriptures by other members sitting in the church. They can actually stop him. If somebody is speaking and then somebody else has a revelation, he can say, excuse me, but I have this revelation, and he can speak that. And this is what happened it was Paul's method of conducting the church was he reasoned with them, he persuaded them, he talked to them, and it was a conversational. Is what the word used is not preaching but dialogue. He dialogued with people. So naturally the church grew because people could ask questions and they could resolve their problems, and they could, if they didn't have anybody else to do it, they could themselves look in the scriptures and resolve their problems. So it was a very fast way of maturing a church when it is a participatory church. Unfortunately in our church, most of our people are just dumb spectators. It's a spectator church. You go there all dressed up and you just warm the pews, and at the end of the day you offer your offerings and you get blessed for that and you come back. That is no church. The original church was a participatory church. There were no dumb spectators there. And what about the role of worship? We just don't read anywhere when they gather together to worship. This word is very much exaggerated today in our when we call it worship service, but the people really got together to exhort one another, to encourage one another, to comfort one another, to pray for one another. This kind of church was there. And what about praise and worship and singing? The singing is yes, you can bring psalms, but the original church was a secret church. They were a persecuted church. They couldn't make much noise, so you could make melody in your heart. In Ephesians 5:19 it says you can sing what you like, etc., etc., but finally you can make melody as loud as you can in your heart. So making melody in your heart was all that you could do in those churches under the situation they were living in, because it was a very persecuted church. And even today, if you go anywhere in the world where the church is growing very fast, like China and certain parts of India In other countries, and certainly in Muslim countries, you cannot sing because you make a noise and you are in trouble. You can be imprisoned, you can even be killed. So music is not found very much in the New Testament. It's an Old Testament phenomena. In the temple, David was a singer, and we have all kinds of instruments, but not a single instrument is mentioned in the New Testament, and no singing is mentioned either, except in Gethsemane, when Jesus was his disciple on the last night. He sang with his disciples, and the other time is when Paul was in jail with Silas, and then they sang very loudly. So if you are in jail, you can always sing loudly, because it can't get any worse. And certainly if you are about to be crucified like Jesus, you can also sing. Those are the only two exceptions that you have for singing in the New Testament. Otherwise it's all singing melody, making melody in your heart. The church, as I mentioned earlier, grew rapidly because of its participatory nature. And the other thing about this was the church, we know it was a secret church because the Christians practiced this. They put these fish sign saying "Ichthus" outside their house, and those who understood, the Christians would understand the believer lives here, and they would meet there secretly. And so it was a secret church. And even today we find that in some of the countries, this kind of church, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in His name, Jesus is there. And so this kind of church is functioning and growing rapidly. The smaller the number, the faster it grows, because the communication is very good. People can talk to each other, they can resolve their problems and pray for each other. In a big church, it's a very difficult problem, and people don't even know each other. And certainly the maturity of membership in the larger church is pretty poor, because they can only go dress up and go to the church without any adequate preparation. But in the first century church, people gathered together in houses, under the trees, in catacombs, and in secret places, and that's why the church grew so rapidly. In the first century church, because of this Nicolaitan character, which would usually destroy the church when somebody takes up the leadership, this was not possible, because if you made a statement, everybody questioned that statement, and they wanted to have a confirmation, affirmation it from the scriptures. So that way everybody grew, and you could share dreams, you could share visions, you could share revelations, you could share things, prophetic things, that the church was a prophetic church. And so then they knew what was happening in the church. And Amos 3:7 says that that God will not do anything in that area unless He first tells His prophets. So this prophetic church, God would speak to them through different kinds of revelations, through dreams, visions, revelations, and God would speak to them what He's going to do in that area. And this was very important, and this is still very important. If it's a prophetic church, God will speak to this church, and then He will work through this church. And so we all need to get back to this original church value system. We have built structures which are non-reproducible. They're impossible structures, they're expensive structures, and it costs so much to run these churches that we have no time really to go and plant churches among the remote places where the gospel is not yet preached. It just anchors us into a place like that. Once we are removed from the buildings, once we are removed from the professional clergy, once we are removed from the Sunday service, this church could meet anytime, anywhere, any place. It could meet in the house, it could meet under a tree, it could meet in a shop, it could meet in a workshop, it could meet even in the kitchen, or at the open well, and a tea shop. So this church could meet anywhere. Wherever 2 or 3 were gathered together in His name, it was the bride of Christ because Jesus was there. And so we need to go back to the original value. And when we get, and the closer we get to the first functioning of the first century church, the faster the church will grow. Another thing they always did during this church is they shared their meals. In Ephesians chapter 20, in Acts chapter 20 verse 7, we read that Paul has come to, he has called the Ephesian elders, and they are all gathered together and on the first day of the week, and they are meeting over there, and it's an all-night meeting. And we often make this mistake of thinking this is a Sunday meeting because it says the first day of the week. But this is not a Sunday meeting, it's a Saturday night meeting, because the first day of the week for Jewish people started on Saturday night. And so this was an all-night meeting, and they ate food many times until midnight. This fellow, Eutychus, fell off the window, and there was a lot of commotion, and they came back after that, after reviving him, and again they had a meal together. And early morning, Paul left for Assos, and the rest of the people went off to work, because the first day of the week, that is Sunday, was a working day. So there is no instance in which the early church ever met on Sunday. And it met every day, as we read in Acts 2:47, and the Lord added to their numbers daily, because they met daily. So they met in people's homes, and they shared the meals, and they shared each other's problems. They prayed for each other, and people came to these house churches. There was so much love between them. It was like a family. There was so much love that often neighbors would join these church and become part of it, simply because they saw the love among them. In our context, and in certain contexts in the Eastern countries, and certainly in Muslim countries, no person of other faith will come to our church buildings. It's just not on. But they will happily come to your house, or you can happily go to their house and share your testimony with them. So the early church functioned any day, anytime, anywhere. It was a participatory church, and the church was a secret church. It was an underground church. It only admitted people who they thought was for security reasons, and even so they were persecuted, and many of them were killed, many of them were eaten by wild animals, fed to the lion and hungry wild animals. So many were sawn asunder, but the church grew. The church kept growing because they were so strong in faith, and they were so close to each other. They would cling to each other even during severe persecution. And we need to get back to this original church. Since the church has gone out of the family environment, it was a family church, and has gone to some remote building and run by some remote person on a remote day, the family is no longer the seat of spiritual activity which it was in the first century church. And because of this, the family relationships were lost, because it is no longer a house of prayer of God. Once we start to bring these values into the families, and where families gather together and worship together and sing together and praise God together, and signs and wonders take place, and they pray for each other, then the church will certainly rapidly grow again. God's aim is that from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria to the ends of the earth. And house churches are very economical, very feasible, and anybody, because we are all royal priests, all of us can be involved in it and participate in it. And we need to get back to that original church. That is, the house church is our mother church. May God bless you.